Appleton Police Department was formed in January of 1869. The City Council passed Ordinance 55, which created a permanent police department. During them years, the early years, you were just, the City Council and the mayor appointed people to the police department, and your appointment was for 1 year. So every year you had to be reappointed. And one of the important things then came along in 1898, when the city formed a Police and Fire Commission. And with the Police and Fire Commission, they set up rules and regulations for the hiring and firing and monitoring the police department from that day on. So that was a really important date because it took the hiring and firing away from the mayor and the city council. Well, an important thing happened, as far as I'm concerned, in July of 1900. At that time, one of the officers resigned from the police department. And the police chief at that time appointed another person to fill that officer's place. Well, the mayor said, no way, I'm the mayor, I make the appointments to the police department. And the chief of police said, well, I'm the chief and I make the appointments. So they had a big hearing about it, the Police and Fire Commission. The police chief appeared with his attorney and the mayor appeared with his attorney. And they had an all-day hearing in front of the Police and Fire Commission. And at the end of the hearing, the Police and Fire Commission ruled that the police chief, the person acting as police chief, had the power to appoint people to the police department, and then that person was then approved by the Police and Fire Commission. So it took the mayor and the city council out of the equation altogether, which was, to me, was an important thing. Another thing was in April of 1922, when Appleton appointed its first police woman. And people asked me as well, was she just like a meter maid or something like that? No, she was a fully authorized police officer, and she received the same pay as the male officers. And that day there were, including the chief, there were 17 officers. She became the 18th officer on the police department. 1937, the city council changed the rules that, well, the state kind of come down on it. And but up until they changed the rules that Appleton officers would work an 8-hour day shift. In the beginning, an officer worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then it changed later to they had 1 day off a month, where and then it kept improving at the and then as time went by, we got radios and then cars. An interesting thing to me is in the early days, when the city, which is in about 1900, the city got its first patrol wagon, which was a wagon with the horses. Well, the wagon, because the police department didn't have no place to keep a wagon, the wagon was kept at the fire department, the #1 fire department. Well, the driver who drove that wagon, was his title was patrol driver. He lived at the fire department. And when the desk sergeant got a call and that something was going on, he would ring the fire department. And then the fire department would wake up the patrol driver in the middle of the night. If it was in the middle of the night, he'd wake up the patrol driver. Patrol driver would come down, harness up the horses, hook the horses to the wagon, and by that time the police sergeant would come over from the police department, and the two of them would go out on a call. And then when the call was over, they'd go back, put the horses in the wagon away, and everybody go back to bed until the next call. Main difference is the communications. They have, like when I started on the police department, you didn't have radios, you didn't have computers, didn't have telephones. We had a call box. On certain corners in the city of Appleton, there was a call box. And when we walked our beat, you were assigned a beat. When you walk a beat, you either called in on the half hour or the hour. And if you missed a call, then the desk sergeant who took the calls would send out a squad car looking for you. In 1960, when I started, there were 4 squads, well, 3 squads and 2 traffic squads, and they had radios in them. But that was the only person that the desk sergeant had contact with. So, but all the patrol officers that walked beat, we had to call in the call boxes. Well, then as time went on, there was more squad cars. And then they had motorcycles, and then somewhere around 1970s, in that early 70s, is when they did away with the beat walkers. Then everybody was in squad cars, so that made a big difference. In 1914, they moved the police department to Midway, which was at that time, even in my time, it was like an alleyway or a street that run halfway between Washington and College Avenue, and it run between Oneida and Appleton, where the City Hall is now. Well, that alley went all the way through. And in the center of that alley, there was what they call was a telephone company building that was too small for the telephone company, so they moved out, and they moved the police department in. So we got another used building. Well, in 1915, the City of Appleton Fire Department went mechanical. They got rid of their horses, and they got motorized vehicles for the fire trucks. Okay, in March of 1969, the Gimbal's bought the building on the corner there to build their store. So we got moved out to on the corner of Appleton and Franklin Street, which was a building that had been used by a company that sold automobile parts, and they fixed engines and stuff in there. But they said, that's okay, because you're only going to be there for just a little while, because we'll get you a better place. Well, the little while turned out to be 1976. We were there. And in 1976, just before is when they built the new police station on Walnut Street, where it is now. And we moved in there, and it was like moving into heaven when we moved in there. And then a couple of years ago, they remodeled it into what it is now, which is really a nice building. We work for the community, and if there's a certain if the citizens in a certain part of town have a problem, they let the police department know. So then we change our patrol areas, and we patrol different areas, and they sure control the pay. Now if you got a good college degree and you come on the police department, pay makes a difference, because if you got that degree, you can go maybe someplace else and get a job. Pay is not the only thing. To me, a person that is on a police department and stays on for a career is somebody that this is what they want to do. This is their life. This is what they look forward to doing. Just like people that go join the military, and some get out, some stay in. It's a calling. And I spent 30 years in Appleton, and I enjoyed every day of it. If I wouldn't have got old, I'd still be there. So it's a tremendous job. And when somebody asks me, some young person comes up and talks to me and asks me about the police department, and I tell them, in my opinion, being a police officer, you can do more good for more people than any other job there is.